Whenever I think of Italian food, I always think of, being at a big table surrounded by either friends or by your family, because to me, that's what it's all about. Italian food is really something that is supposed to be shared. Back in Italy, my grandfather was a chef, and he could cook some amazing things. And to me, that always inspired me to learn as much as I could about Italian food. I have with me here an espresso machine, and this was a gift from my aunt a couple of years ago, and she got it from a friend who lived in Italy for years. And espresso really is kind of like the quintessential Italian drink because there's so many different ways you can make it. You might get an espresso on your way to work, or stop in the afternoon after lunch to have a cup of coffee. It's about something simple but is quality, and I think that's really what Italian food is all about. I wanted to share the stories that people had behind the food that they made and why that's important to them, and to me that's what I really wanted to share in this documentary. The first part of my journey takes me to Little Rock, where I met Chef Dennis Sayer. Born in France, Chef Dennis came to Little Rock in the 1970s and helped shape the food scene in Central Arkansas. I stopped by his home as he prepared dinner for some friends.
I like to cook what I like to eat, but I never get tired of Italian food. I eat Italian food as often as French food. And Italian food, it's easy. Pasta, I like fresh pasta. I make everything here, always. So I usually cook Italian food, maybe, for me, at least once or twice a week. For my friends, maybe once a month. I trained a little bit with my grandmother. She had a country restaurant. Then I went to cooking school. I was about 13 and a half. And for 3 years, and after that I started traveling in Europe a lot. And I came in 1975. I never worked in Italy, actually. I traveled to Italy a bunch. But I never worked in Italy. I worked in Switzerland. And that's where I really met a lot of Italians. A lot of Italians, especially south, like Bari, Lecce, and Calabria. Worked in Switzerland at the time, so everybody that worked in the kitchen with me was Italian. So it was pretty cool. So tonight, first the spinach and ricotta gnocchi with a white and red sauce. And then I'll do a pork tenderloin with a mushroom sauce, one mushroom, morels, and shiitake, and porcini, and whatever. And then we'll do a risotto alla Milanese with saffron, some lentils, salad, sabayon with strawberries, and olive oil cake. Have you ever had that? I'm so used to cook a commercial. Look at that. The paint is bubbling because in my restaurant the oven was always at full blast, 550. I do the same here, but the paint is not liking it at all. If I were to retire, I would probably go to either Sicily or Sardinia. But the South, I love the South because I like North Africa, I like Morocco, Tunisia, and I like the tomato sauce. It's very cooked a lot.
Francis Ford Coppola's been in, Ted Danson, Mary Steenburgen. You hear people all the time talk about, comfort food. Italian food is really all comfort food. You have the pastas, you have so many different categories. I guess I would kind of call it like the underdog of food. So just a few cents, you can make a beautiful dish. When I was 14, I started working at the Ramada Inn in Batesville, and I started cooking there and really enjoyed it. After that, just bounced around to several different restaurants until I wound up at Casanelli 1700, and that's when the first time I became exposed to real fine dining, high-end Italian food, and that's a game changer for me. But then I went to school. They sent me to Italy to do a 6-month program there. The school was in a small town outside of Asti called Castiglione d'Asti, and it was in a castle. It was really cool. So that right away just kind of blew all of the students away. But we had weekends off, so we went to Venice, we went to Bologna, we went Florence. We went all around. The next part of the program was to work, so all the students split up into different restaurants. The restaurant I went to was in Liguria, and a friend of mine, or one of my buddies from school, they went to a restaurant in Emilia Romagna in Bologna, outside of Bologna. And so I was going to go visit him for the weekend. The dad knew the chef, Bruno, at the restaurant that he worked at. And so he asked me to do him a favor. I said, of course, Franco, I'll do you a favor. He said, take him this case of wine. And so I've got a case of wine I'm lugging around with me on the trains. Anyway, so I get there, and he was so excited about it. He took me out back. He said, all the reservations are full tonight, but he put a tablecloth on a patio table out back, and we're in the Emilia Romagna, and it was just all farmland and back behind it. We were out, kind of in a small town outside, and it just happened to be facing west. The sun was setting. It was just it was like a movie scene. This is the one that people request the most, is the bar side, is what they call it. And in my spare time, I'm a woodworker, so I actually built this bar. And the rails, do a little welding for the rails. All the tabletops, we cover them up with tablecloths, but one time we did. And of course, the open kitchen. That's why people like this room so much, is because you can see all the action back here. You want to go down the wine cellar? This is where we started. We worked on this place for about a year and a half before we were able to open. My uncle bought the building, and Brian and I decided to lease the space from him. And so while he was working on the outside of the building, we were working on the inside of the building, just as in our spare time to get ready. So this is where we started. We cut it has a concrete slab, so we cut the concrete, and my granddaddy and I and my brother brought in a small excavator, dug it all out, and then we dug the rest by hand. Brian and I poured the concrete walls and the floor. I built the wine racks, and so this actually holds about 1,000 bottles, if you can believe it.
So how long did it take you just to build the wine cellar?
Well, the cellar itself, it took us, I don't know, a month. About a month. But it's been remodeled a couple different times over the years, and this is the latest one. And I think this is the one we're going to wind up sticking with. Of course, this is where you walk in, the hostess stand, which my mother actually works here with us and has for almost since the day we've opened. About 14 years, I think now. Let's go back here to the pizzeria. We added this about 3 years ago. This space here became available to us about 3 years, so we turned it into a pizzeria.
My family originated in Sicily. I really developed my love for food and for wine from my grandparents. I learned everything about food probably from my Nonna. I tended to hang out in her kitchen, and the more she would tell me stories about the old country and just the way of life, and certainly my mom and everybody, they loved to cook. The way I trained as a chef, I'm extremely good at cooking anything seafood, or I love to do things though that are a little bit more rustic. Probably my favorite thing to make for people is just a white bean soup. My grandfather used to say, food is a celebration of life, and then wine is the extension of that. And for me, culture is cuisine, cuisine is culture. It's not just what you're putting on the plate, but the experience of being with other people, sharing conversation. It's nurturing you and also nourishing you at the same time. But probably for me, if I were to say, well, what would be the one dish you would teach Americans so they would feel like they were, part of an Italian family, it would be something pasta, because just the fun of rolling out that dough and then, figuring out the shape of whatever the pasta is going to be. There is a level of simplicity with Italian food. There's not a lot of heavy sauces, and you're not having to, do the cooking techniques are more approachable to most cooks. So I think that helps. It's a simple way to cook. It also takes less ingredients, so people don't feel like they have to go out to a specialty store to go and make special food. Most of the ingredients we use are common things that most people are familiar with.
Leaving Little Rock, I returned to the Delta, where I met up with some friends who were throwing a dinner party.
In my grandmother's spaghetti sauce,
Yeah.
it's say garlic, onions, celery, and bell peppers. And I'm about to add the tomato paste. You kind of fry your tomato paste just a little bit, and then you add some water to even out the sauce. And then you add your diced tomatoes, or your fresh tomatoes preferably, if you have those. And then you're gonna simmer it all down. This is more of a chunky spaghetti sauce than a thin marinara.
3 cups of flour, and then I use malt, 2 tablespoons of malt extract, and one cup of yeast, and then I let the yeast sit in here for about 10 minutes and it gets all bubbly like beer. And then I mix it up and let it just rise, and I just let it rise. Then I take it and press it all down, and put my olive oil on the top, and then I put sea salt and little dimples in there, and then I put the let that rise for about 20 minutes, and then it's ready to put in the oven.
Sharing a meal with others is what Italian food is all about. Whether being around professional chefs or just people who love to cook, it's something special to be around those who want to share what they love doing. Food is something that makes us who we are. It's a part of us, and sharing that personal side of the story is that X factor. It's that extra property which gives meaning to something we love doing.